Hello, Scott.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on. We're very, very happy to have you. I think we just got to get right into it. So tell us who you are, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Scott Norman, and I work for Priority Health, and I oversee our consumer markets sales team.
Very
And
cool.
consumer markets for us is our any product that is sold to consumers. So anything that's non-group basically is how I think
Okay.
about it. So
So it is
individual
Medicare
markets,
and
Medicare Advantage, Medigap, all of our ACA products, short term, even our hospital indemnity product, those types of things. Anything that's a consumer-based product, that's what our team does. Is we go out and work primarily with agents, and we work to sell those products. And it's the first time we've had this type of structure at Priority Health. We've had teams in the past. I call it the Noah's Ark theory. We had two of everything. We had an ACA team, we had a Medicare team, we had a product team for ACA and a product team for Medicare. And so we've kind of combined some of those things. And this is the first time we've had really a truly combined sales team.
that's amazing.
For consumer products. It's a really big part of our business. It's 30% of our enrollment at Priority Health is in a consumer-based product, but over half of our revenue comes from consumer-based products at Priority Health. And so it's a really big part of our business, and it's a big part of what we do. And I love it. I get to work with agents. I get to work with people who love what they do, and so it makes my job really fun.
I love that.
How long have you been with Priority now?
So I started at Priority Health in 2010 in the employer group space, actually. And so I was actually overseeing the group sales area for most of my first tenure at Priority Health. And then I left for a period of time, and I went and helped actually launch a Medicare Advantage plan for a smaller health plan. And then I became a boomeranger. Came back to Priority Health in 2022, I think,
Okay.
in the Medicare role. And I love Medicare. Medicare is like one of my most favorite lines of business I've ever worked in part because I think you get to help people is one of the main reasons. Not that you don't get to in other lines of business, but it's the one space where you know the people who are enrolling in those products really appreciate the product and they appreciate what they get from the health plan. And some other lines of business, you don't get that feeling as much because of the nature of the product or how people are purchasing the product. But in Medicare, you get this like amazing, I say you get to intersect people at points in their life where they really need you and they really appreciate it. And you can actually help change somebody's life. And so for me, like I fell in love with Medicare, and that started back in 2016 when I took the job at Priority Health as the VP of Medicare, moving from VP of sales on the group side to Medicare, and which I knew nothing about. And I took that job because our old CEO at the time, Joan Budden, who I love, Joan, worked for her for years. She told me I should do it.
Yeah.
She said, you should take this job. I said, Joan, I don't know anything about Medicare. And she said, yeah, but just take the job. You'll learn it. You'll figure it out.
Sure.
And so for the first year, I was like the dumbest person in every room. And here I am like the leader of the team, but know very little. I've had people like LaDominic Brandon who like literally had forgotten more about Medicare than I would ever know, who was like amazing. And and I would walk into these rooms just trying to like fake it a little bit, you know.
Sure.
But I loved it. It was great.
Don't you find as a leader in that role, it's not as much about the product information as empowering the people who you're leading?
I mean, you have to have some knowledge and skill,
Sure.
clearly, depending on the nature of the role you're in. But the higher you get in leadership, there's a couple things I've always thought about that. One is it's lonely in leadership.
Yeah.
It can be one of the toughest parts of the jobs is the fact that it can feel a little bit lonely at times because really good leaders know that credit goes to the people that got you to where you are, created the success. And if there's a problem, that's on you. You can't defer that problem to your team because it's your team and you need to own the problem.
Right.
And so you find yourself in those places, you know, where it's a little bit like a lonely place at times. But the best leaders that I've always worked for really create a vision for where you want to go and create a space where you want to be a part of something bigger than you. And when you create that for people and you empower them, then they'll walk through a wall for you. And that's like the best leaders that I've ever worked for. I've had that feeling where like I would do anything and to make this happen because that's part of something bigger. And it isn't about how smart you are about the product or the service or whatever it is you're doing. It's can you create that environment and have a team of people who are willing to put in the extra work, do the work that is needed to be successful. And if they're really good at what they do, by the way, it makes your job a lot easier and you don't have to know everything.
Right.
But it's a scary thing to walk into a room and know that your team knows more about something than you do, but you got to trust that, they're going to do the right thing and give them that power to do the right thing, maybe make a mistake. But those are the best leaders I've worked for.
I love
Nice.
that. I will say Ladam she paid you very, very nice compliments today. Just called you a very masterful leader, a wonderful person to work for. So,
Well, Ladam is one of the most amazing people I've worked with in the
Yeah.
past, and I've loved working with her. I got to know Ladam when I was an agent, so I was an
Okay.
agent before I went to Priority Health.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And I was doing group business and selling group insurance and loved it. It was great and had fun. And I dabbled in Medicare and I messed something up. and I totally messed up. I can't remember exactly the details now, but I called Priority Health and they said, well, talk to Ladam. And I'm like, well, who's Ladam? I
Yeah.
didn't know her. And I call her and talk to her and like within an hour she had it fixed and solved. And then when I went to work at Priority Health, I like sought her out. I'm like,
Yeah.
because I had such high regard for her and she's amazing. She's like a fearless person who will just take on any project. And I've always said that she was their member number one for Priority Health because she literally started and launched that product for us. So, and now she's an agent doing her thing and
Yep.
it's awesome. And
Yeah.
Full circle.
I can't
almost.
think of anything better for somebody than for her to have that.
Yeah.
And
Totally agree.
this may be going out of order a little bit, and I don't want to break up the conversation, but I am curious. We always ask people, when you were growing up, did you dream about being in the health insurance industry? Like, can you walk us through kind of your overall career path?
Well, I dreamed of being a surfer. actually.
Okay.
I grew up in northern Michigan in Kalkaska, home of the
Nice.
Blue Blazers and the Trout Festival that just happened last weekend or 2 weekends ago. And so, surfing was really big up in Kalkaska. So I thought that's going to be me. I'm going to move to California. I'm going to be a surfer. And then reality hit and I had to get a job. And I actually grew up, my dad had a wood shop up near Kalkaska.
Oh, that's right. I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah, it's I always call
cool.
it like I learned a lot from doing that, working with him. I worked with him for years, and a lot of ways I figured I would just do that, like somewhere and take over and build cabinets. And he taught me how to build cabinets. He taught me everything like that there was about leadership in life and how to make a business work and amazing story. Like his story is a podcast in and of itself, honestly, like what they did. And my team has heard these stories so many times, if they listen to this, they're gonna be like, oh my God, he's talking about the wood shop
Wood
again.
shop again.
But the wood shop I call them lessons from the wood shop. And,
I love that.
and they started that wood shop in 1975 in northern Michigan, a little cattle barn halfway between Kalkaska and Traverse City. So if you know that area,
Yeah.
there's not much. In 1975, there was even less there.
Right.
And he opened up a cabinet shop and started building furniture. And he had 2 kids under the age of 5. He was 25 years old. My mom was 24. And neither of them had gone to college. And they scraped together some money to buy a barn and tried to make this thing work. And 30 years later, he sold the business, put 2 kids through college. And I've always said the odds of his business being successful is probably as close to 0 as you can get. And it takes like the right person to be able to make that work. And there were so many lessons I learned from that experience that I still talk about today. Like I said, I call them lessons from the wood shop. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
But no, I backed into insurance.
Okay.
I needed a job and I ended up in sales. It was in 1998, I think. And I was working for the Michigan Retailers Association. I got licensed to sell health insurance. We sold Blue Cross. We had a little area rated product that we could sell to retailers, and we sold workers' comp insurance. We sold Delta dental insurance, and we sold bank card processing. That was our number one product that we sold. And I learned a
Interesting.
ton about selling from my old boss, John Maylaban and Tom Tuggle, who kind of taught me like how to sell for the first time. And we did this big mailer about health insurance. I got licensed and I knew how to sell it, and we get back to the office and our boss was there and he said, well, how'd that turn out, the mailer? And I said, I didn't sell any health insurance, but I sold like 15 bank card customers. So it was great. And he said, well, you're supposed to sell the health insurance. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I sold this other stuff and it was great. And then I went over to the Michigan Chamber of Commerce about 5 years after I started at retailers and started working in the insurance division at the Michigan Chamber. And that's how I really started doing health insurance, was there. And really loved it. We were doing group insurance, and
Hmm.
we would sell to anybody in Michigan, and we had a large database of members, and we would go out and try to help them, solve their health insurance issues. And, the premiums were going up. They needed somebody to come in and help give them advice. And I probably would have stayed doing agent work, and then healthcare reform came along, and I wasn't sure what the future was. And I'd sold a ton of Priority Health business. So they came and said, "Do you want to come, run our sales team in
Wow.
the Detroit area?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And then I realized how hard it was when I got there, and like how tough that market was.
Sure.
But I loved it. It was great. It was just, you just keep like saying yes to opportunities along the way. And then somehow you find yourself into a career, and 20 some odd years later,
Yeah.
doing what I do. So
I love that.
that's it.
Yeah, and a little bit easier for an insurance agent to have longevity maybe than surfing.
Yeah, well, I think I could have made it still. No, I don't know. I tried surfing, actually. Went on vacation, and it's tough.
Yeah,
Like, we're down in Mexico, but it's tough.
I think insurance pays better than surfing as well.
It does a little bit. I was a skateboarder too. I actually still skateboard.
Oh, do you
Nice.
really?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there used to be a really good skate park here in Grand Rapids, actually, the old mall, and they tore it down, Modern Skate. And I would leave Priority Health sometimes, and I had a skateboard in my trunk, and I would take my suit off, business suit, when we were more casual, or we were more formal back then. We're not now. And I would go to the skate park and drop in the bowl there and skate the bowl.
Nice.
And,
Oh
I,
my
and I used to
gosh.
think I got to be the only person who's like, at the time I was in my 40s, and I just thought it was fun. It was a great stress relief. It was
Yeah.
super fun,
I love
as long as
that.
you didn't get
Awesome.
hurt.
Yeah, that's so funny. I know that you'd mentioned, before we were sitting down and recording, looking back at some moments in your career that shaped your leadership. I'd love to hear if anything comes to mind of anything that shapes your leadership style now.
That's a good question. Boy, I wasn't ready
know.
for that one.
I know, that's
There are
okay.
so many moments. I'd have to think about which ones shaped the most. There are moments in time that I still talk about.
Mm-hmm.
When I started at Priority Health in 2010, we were struggling a little bit financially. We had some
Mhm.
underpriced products. And I remember my first day on the job. I get there, I'm all excited, it's going to be awesome. And they show me this dashboard, and they show the financials, and there's this big giant red number there. And I said, "Is that a placeholder?" And my boss said, No, that's accurate. That's actual. And I said, "Is that for like year to date?" He said, "No, that's for the month of August," or whatever month it was. And I remember driving home, calling my wife, and she said, "How's the first day?" I'm like, "It's great." I'm like, "I don't know if I'm coming back for day 2, because I don't know if we'll be in business." But we had some pricing problems, and I remember, we had to take some really difficult measures. Those first couple of years were tough, where we took a
Mhm.
lot of large rate increases out. It was hard on agents. It was hard on employers. And then all of a sudden they made me the VP of sales.
Mm.
And thinking about like that time, we lost so many members that my first year as a VP of sales,
Mm.
because we made really hard decisions. And our CEO at the time was Mike Freed. And I remember one day, it was around 5:00. We had just made a decision on a really large employer, and they termed because we wouldn't budge on the rates, and we just had to do it. And
Mhm.
I remember him walking down to my office and just coming in, and he said, "I just want you to know we're doing the right thing. I know how hard it is as a sales leader to make these decisions, but they're the right decisions for us for the long term. And I just want you to know that you and the team, I have your back on this, and support, and we're doing the right thing."
Mm.
And it meant a lot for me to hear that, because
Yeah.
I knew that, no matter what happened, that Mike understood what we were doing, and he gave us that like strength of, this is the right
Reassurance.
thing.
Yeah.
And we're looking out, 2-3 years down the road, and we're making decisions for the future.
Mhm.
And it worked. We lost a lot of members, but by the time I left that role, we had started to regrow, and then our trajectory. Now we have 1.3 million members,
It's amazing.
and so his vision was very clear. And as a leader, that's what I remembered from him, was he had a very unique way of creating a vision.
Mm.
Even if you didn't totally believe the vision, you kind of wanted to believe the vision,
Mhm.
because
Mm.
he stuck true to it.
Yeah.
And he would say things in like all staff of like, "We can change the world."
Yeah.
And then he would walk through this scenario, and you knew really at the end, we're not going to change the world, but you believed in this idea of the things that we could do to make a difference in the
Mhm.
community.
Mhm.
And that's the type of thing, when I think about that, of like, as a leader, if you can create that vision for people, that's when they will really line up and follow behind you. They don't do it for like market share. They don't do it for, how many sales you made or this, that, or the other thing. They do it for believing in something bigger. And that's who I would point to probably.
Yeah.
What
I love that.
What comes to mind, what you're saying there, Scott, is you're playing a infinite game. I think a lot of times leaders, especially, they're holding people to a number on a timetable that, is just kind of made up. Like, we need to hit these numbers in this quarter, when it's kind of a finite game, where if you play the infinite game and you're looking long term, and you and I and Ron Crowfoot had some conversations about recent price changes and plan development, where you're like, this is not a move just for right now. And we need to do this and I've talked with other people about this, like, winning the business doesn't mean that your business is winning. Where if you are incorrectly priced, but so you get a ton of customers, it's really going to affect your long-term success, just like, like an agent is overly investing in something or they're running all over the place,
Right.
meeting with everybody in their home. It's not really something that they can do in the long term.
I agree. And I think if you think about it from an agent perspective, I've always said agent's value is their book of business.
Yep.
And how stable their book of business is, how much they can depend on it, and how much service that book of business requires them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, when you think about, I've always felt like at Priority Health, we've always done a good job of playing the long game and not necessarily chase. I used to say, don't chase bad premium. You can do it, but it ends up costing you in the end. And we've made mistakes from time to time or got things wrong. But in general, you try to like plan for where you want to be in the next few years. And as an agent, the value to that is hopefully you get more stability.
Yeah.
So you don't have these wild swings from year to year, because that's really exhausting for an agent, because you're representing the product to your client, whether it's a Medicare member, an individual, an employer. And what you don't want to have to do is come back and undo that or change it or service it. And so the value of that book of business is the value of the business for the agent. And so who you choose to partner with, their stability, what they are doing for long term, to me is super important as an agent to think about those things when you're thinking about who do you want to partner with.
For sure.
So that I do believe that. And Ron's a great example of that. Ron and I worked together off and on since 2010. I've always said he can't get rid of me. Like every time we switch jobs, all of a sudden we're back together again. And he recently retired from Priority Health after 17 years, and great guy, just, knows a ton about the business. And, he was always one who would think long term. He was never swayed by like the latest and greatest. And, at times you want to push, but you have to think long term. And we've done a pretty good job of that, I think, as a company.
Yeah. I want to hear more about the lessons from the woodshop, and if you have a favorite one.
I have so many. The one I probably talk about the most and that I think is the most important in life, because I think it's the best life lesson, is like everybody says, failure is not an option. Failure is always an option. I mean, let's be real. Like, failure exists in the world, and fear of failure exists, and it's natural, and you should have it. And a healthy fear of failure is a good thing. Because this idea of like, I don't fear failure, I just don't think that's true. We all fear failure, everybody.
Yeah.
Doing a podcast creates this fear of like, I don't want to mess up or say something wrong. But I think about my dad a lot and my mom. And when you're 25 years old and you're kind of going all in on an idea, and you have 2 kids under the age of 5, like you have to figure out how you're going to make this thing work.
Yeah.
And so I guarantee you that they feared failure. And if you ask them, that they did for sure. What they didn't do is they didn't let that fear of failure stop them from moving forward. And that's the lesson I always learned, is like you have lots of things in life, whether it's work, whether it's personal, and you fear those things, but you can't let that stop you.
Yeah.
And then when you do have something that doesn't go right, you have to just be willing to work through those things. And so not allowing that fear of failure to slow you down and to keep moving forward, to me, is like one of the best lessons that I've always learned. And I've always had this natural belief that everything just works itself out eventually.
Yeah.
I call, I'm like the silver lining. Some people's other dark clouds.
Yeah.
I just think eventually things work themselves out, but you have to kind of make that happen. And and it was intentional. Like it makes it sound like oh, my dad's business just worked itself out. It didn't. He made very intentional decisions, and he's a very smart business person who's never been formally trained. You know, but just understands business in the way that you need to be successful. And it can apply if you're a one-man cabinet shop in Northern Michigan, or if you're a Fortune 500 company, the lessons are like universal.
Totally.
And they're there if you want to pay attention to them. And there's so many of them. There are so many that I've threatened that I should write a book about this.
I was just going to suggest that.
I'm just a terrible writer, though, so I'd have to have a ghostwriter do it, you know.
Or just start a podcast.
Yeah,
My grammar is
we
so
can do
bad.
another
We
one.
could. This could be your spin-off of Agent Confidential to Lessons from the Woodshop.
It's all
love
yours,
it.
man.
His best one, though, like from a business perspective, is keep things simple. And I know everybody's, oh, keep it simple, stupid. You know, that it's a very common. We make things more complex than they have to be sometimes.
Totally agree.
And so the best example I have of that from him was his pricing strategy. And I remember it to this day because he taught me how to price cabinets. He taught me like all of the things about the business. And he would do his pricing strategy was $200 a cabinet, $50 for every door and drawer. And this is back in the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember asking him, well, what if it's a big cabinet or a small cabinet? He said, well, you know, it takes about the same amount of time to build a cabinet. Doesn't matter if it's bigger or smaller. He said on the big ones, I probably don't make as much money. On the small ones, I make more. But in the end, it kind of works itself out. Yeah. I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, how do you know if your prices are right? And he said, well, you know, if I sell every one I quote, I'm probably too low. And if I don't sell any, I'm probably too high. So I just want to be somewhere in the middle. I'm like, okay, makes sense. But the genius of what he would do is two things. One is, and this is like I learned from him, like he would hand sketch the cabinets and the layout for somebody for their kitchen. And then he would count up the cabinets, count up the doors and drawers, give you a quote right there on the spot.
Speed.
And so other people would, let me go back and I'll do the math and I'll figure it out and I'll do the layout and I'll get back with you in a couple weeks. And a month goes by and they don't get back because they get busy. But he knew if I have somebody in the store right now, if they know what they want, I can give them a quote right now, 25% down, and I can do the job for you to be done in 6 weeks.
Keeping it easy for the consumer.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was the genius behind it wasn't that he didn't have to waste a lot of time doing quotes. That was part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the ability to give somebody a quote right there on the spot and know that you can't sweat it. Like, yep, I took a bath on this one, but I did really good on this one. In the end, it kind of works itself out.
Yeah.
And he did for 30 years, so he must have done something right. I don't know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's really cool. I want to know, and I'm curious on how you keep your team motivated in an industry that's changing so much.
I think the fact that it changes actually keeps us motivated, and I think most of our team thrives on that. I think agents thrive on that.
Yeah.
I've always said like the best time to be an agent, the best time to be in the business is when something's going crazy.
Yeah.
Like right now, things are kind of going crazy. Like there's all kinds of news out there. You know, every day it's something different.
Yeah.
And if you're a really good agent, in particular, ACA was a great example. It was a great time to be an agent because you could help people navigate and you become very valuable. Right now is a really great time. I think constant change actually is a motivator, and it in and of itself creates opportunity. And so in those moments where you have things going wrong is actually some of the best times. My favorite time as a leader was when we were like getting hammered on rates and we were losing members. But it was like a bunker mentality. Like we were all in the bunker together. And as a team, you kind of grow that way.
Yeah.
And it's actually some of the best times is when you have to go through hard times and something big and difficult. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a second, we can do this. And that's like for me, the best times at work is when things are kind of going haywire.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's too boring. Like,
well, it's interesting, as Yana has said on this podcast many times, like learning this industry in the last couple of years, a lot of the products are very much the same. Or if I'm an agent, she's an agent selling priority, we're selling the same thing. Yeah. It's our knowledge level.
You're selling yourself.
Right?
Selling yourself.
And
your personal brand is so important. Sorry.
No, you're good. And our ability, I think when there's regulation change, when there's unrest in the marketplace, a lot of people have questions. And when you can answer those and provide value to them they're going to want to work with you.
Yeah, for sure. When I first started at the Michigan Chamber selling group insurance, I didn't know what I was doing, honestly. I mean, I kind of knew, but I was just making it up as I went. And the first time I realized I could actually do it was when I talked to an employer in Detroit area, small little shop, had about 30, 40 employees. This is when HSAs were first rolling out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sent out a mailer about HSAs. He called, I talked to him, and I started talking to him about HSAs and what they can do, what they can't do, that kind of stuff. And he said, how come my agent's not telling me this? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, how can you become my agent? And I said, yeah, sure. If you'd like to, I can just send you over this agent of record letter and you can just sign it and send it in. I'll send it over and I can take over handling your benefits. And I went into my boss who'd hired me at the time. And I said, I think this guy's going to give me an agent of record letter. He's like, no way. I said, I sent it to him. I think it's going to come back. And sure enough, we had faxes then. It got faxed back. And I'm like, holy smokes, like this worked actually. And so that's like that light bulb moment of like, you have to be able to sell yourself. If all you sell is a product or all you sell is on price, the minute that product or price isn't good anymore, you're replaced. Like you can be replaced. And as an agent, I learned that in particular as an agent, because if all you did was go in with a spreadsheet and say, here, this is the lowest price and we can save you money. The next agent that comes in that shows them something lower price, if you haven't sold yourself, you're pretty much a commodity at that point. So sell yourself, sell what you can provide, be a good resource. You know, that's, to me, in sales, you're invaluable. I love our sales team at Priority Health. I think that's what makes them the best in the business. I'm a bit biased, but they're amazing resources to agents because they really understand the business. And I feel like they can provide an agent with so much value. And it's what makes them, to me, some of the best in the business is the team we have and the ability for them to work with our agents.
I love that.
The feeling I got from when I came into this business most recently was every time I'd go to an event, there's multiple representatives of Priority Health there. Or I go to a different area and I see a rep, or I have a question and I have multiple people responding to me, trying to help me out.
It's what I think makes us and other regional plans. So like there are others in the state who I think do a phenomenal job as well too, because of that issue. The ability for you as an agent to pick up a phone and call and get somebody on the phone who can help you.
Yeah.
The larger companies, sometimes it's really hard to do. So it can be really difficult to navigate because we make this unnecessarily complex at times. And the reality is we just have a bunch of really good people at Priority Health that really do go out of their way to help and try to solve problems. And, you know, we're not perfect. We have lots of times where things just don't always go the best, or we make a mistake, but I've always said how we respond to those things, I think I'll put us up against anybody in terms of how we try to help, whether it's an agent or a member, solve a problem. I think that's one of the things that we do really well.
Speaking of your wonderful team, what do you look for when you're building a great team? Like what kind of qualities in people? And
building teams is hard.
Yeah.
And hiring people is really hard.
Yep.
And you have to, I look for people who kind of check the ego at the door.
Yep.
And are willing to work as a team. And I've always said this, personal wins only matter if the teams win. So if the team doesn't win, personal wins don't really matter that much. And so I look for people that kind of live that. Like, yeah, they want to win, really competitive people. LaDom's a great example of that. Again, I keep going back to LaDominic Brandon. But she's like a great example, like really competitive, but also understands the bigger picture and will do it within the context of the team. And again, personal wins matter when the team wins. And so when you have a team of people that believe that and you're surrounded by that, that's the type of team you want, because they're going to do the right thing. Yeah, they want to win, but they also recognize the bigger picture and they're willing to help each other. And it's one of the things that when you have a team like that, or when you have a group of people like that, it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
When you don't, it can be really tough.
Yeah.
And those environments can get really difficult. It's why when you have a good boss, if you got a good boss, and I've got a great boss right now who I love working for, and it makes going to work so much easier. And when you have good teammates who you work with, and I've always felt, even as in my role now, that I'm a teammate with everybody, because we're all on the same team. We're all just trying to get work done. And there is
Yeah.
no hierarchy at that point. And the more hierarchical you get in organizations, the tougher it gets sometimes. And that mentality to me is corrosive and difficult. And
Yeah.
like, it doesn't matter who you are. You should be able to all be approachable, and we're all just trying to pitch in and get things done. And it shouldn't matter who you're contacting. You should be able to know that you're going to get somebody who's going to help you. And
Yep.
so it's hard. And even like the superstars sometimes, like everybody wants to be a team full of superstars.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a team full of superstars, but not because everybody is a superstar. If that makes sense. Sometimes like the superstars can be the hardest people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Especially if they think they're a superstar.
well, that's the thing. Like, you know, but if you've got somebody with a little bit of humility and humbleness and understands the role they play, like that's the balance you're looking for. You want
Yeah.
people who are superstars, but they also know where they fit in the world, and they don't need to prove that every single day. They're just part
Yeah.
of their DNA of who they are. And when you have a team like that, yeah, like it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
One thing that I love is that you've done their job. Typically, you know, if we're talking about agents, where I find in some companies where these C-suite executives haven't been in the trenches, haven't done that, haven't sat at the kitchen table trying to get $15 a month of premium kind of thing so they can, you know, pay their next phone bill.
I mean, I'm not trying to like, this is for agents, you know, and
Yep.
I love the audience, and being an agent's one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
And I've said this having been on both sides, and nothing against, I've worked for health plan, and we need to know one product.
Yep.
We need to know one company. Our team, for the most part, now we have a direct sales team that does some direct selling and enrollment on the phones and whatnot. But for the most part, we're not selling directly.
Right.
And I've always said, if you really think that you can sell, then go be an agent, because you have to sit down with somebody and get somebody to buy from you. It's a different type of sale, and it's a much more challenging sale. Medicare is different because a lot of them have zero premium. Makes it kind of cool. Like, you get to sell a product that's free. In fact, heck, we give people money to enroll now. So like,
Yeah.
go figure that one out. You want to get into that topic of conversation about what's wrong with Medicare, but we can go there if you want to. But being an agent's hard. You have to understand all the different health plans, all their policies, all the rules, the different products, and then you've got to get somebody to actually buy from you and say, I'm not buying from that agent, I'm buying from you. And
Right.
there's a lot that you have to do there. It's super fun, but I always have a lot of respect for agents because I know how difficult that is.
Are the numbers still around 70%? That 70% of your sales are from like independent agents? I think
About
that-
80% in Medicare of our book of business comes from independent agents.
Okay.
About 20% either enrolled direct, like just on their
Themselves,
own,
yep.
or through, we do have a small telesales team. And in ACA, in the individual market, it's around 70%, 70-30, and a little bit more self-serve people that are under 65. They don't mind going and shopping. They don't want to talk to anybody, especially
Right.
if they're young. They definitely don't want to talk to anybody, and they'll just go online and do it. Not always the best decision, because I think sometimes they don't know what they're buying, and all of a sudden they realize what they bought. That's where an agent's role comes in, and why they're so
Right.
valuable to us is that they can help guide them to the right product and avoid some of those kind of post-enrollment problems that you see when people self-enroll.
Totally. From your perspective, what makes an agent or agency truly valuable to a carrier today?
There are several things I would say that make agents valuable, and I have some theories about agent carrier relationships. Again,
Yeah.
having been on both sides of that coin,
Mm-hmm.
I've always said that our business interests, I'm going to do stuff with my hands, even though it's a podcast, don't always intersect. Like, our business interests and an agent's business interest, they are separate. Now,
Mhm.
they connect a lot of times, but they don't always connect.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what's in the best interest of an agent is different than what's in the best interest of the carrier.
Mhm.
But the best relationships are the ones where we understand that partnership, we respect the partnership, we don't ask agents to do something that isn't in their interest, and vice versa. And when you have that kind of partnership, even through bad times, when, if rate increases or we made some benefit changes this year, we're willing to kind of work together to solve and work through those things.
Mhm.
That's when you have the best partnership, and it truly is a partnership at that point.
Yeah.
And the best agents are willing to push us a little bit, and they'll call us when we do things wrong or they don't like what we're doing. I have a handful of agents that I know
Wait, agents complain?
Every once in a while. It's funny, and this is a line of business thing. So the difference between the lines of business is amazing. And I've worked in every line of business now, except for Medicaid. I've never worked in the Medicaid space. Medicare agents are the easiest by far. And they're the least amount of issues that we deal with. And then in the group space, you have the most difficult relationships. And difficult isn't bad. They're just more challenging because I think it's because there's more at stake with an employer group and an agent.
Especially the big ones.
The big ones in particular, and those agents know it, and their reputation's on the line.
Yeah.
And they know if a deal goes bad, they could lose an entire group, and that commission hit is big.
Yeah.
And so they're much more engaged. And that's not to say that in Medicare or ACA agents aren't engaged, but you're talking one member at a time. And so if you have an issue, you can kind of work through those issues and it doesn't create as much anxiety. And that's the difference between those two markets I've noticed over the years is they're very different cultures in terms of those agent relationships. And nothing bad. I mean, I've got a ton of great friends that are group agents and I love that space and I worked in that space for years. And but there's just different relationships.
Yeah. Interesting. What common mistakes do agents make when working with carriers that can hurt that relationship?
I think the number one mistake is to not give grace. The relationship is really important.
It is very important.
So I'm choosing my words carefully on this one, but
no, for sure.
There are agents who I will definitely not name, we will do things for, but they're difficult and they're challenging and they don't always treat our team with respect. And I've always said, like in life in general, when you treat people with respect, they will be there for you when you need them.
Yeah.
And when you don't, they won't be.
Yep.
And same in business. And so knowing that we don't do things intentionally to make mistakes, and when mistakes happen, the best agents are the ones that give you a little bit of grace. They understand it. They want to work with you to solve it, and they treat the team with respect. And over the years, most agents do a great job of that. And then there's a handful that don't. And yeah, they may get what they need through brute force, but at the end, that's a tough thing from the carrier side because we're just trying to do our jobs. And that's all. And nobody's out there trying to make a mistake. And, we all make them. They happen, and so giving a little bit of grace there in that relationship and treating each other with respect and vice versa. Our team owes that to agents. And when we don't, I want to hear about it because we should be, because we owe that back. And that relationship is just that. It's a relationship that should be built on kind of mutual trust and respect and that grace of, we all make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like lack of grace again goes back to not playing the long game. I want this problem fixed right now and I'm going to unleash hell until it happens. And it's like, oh wait, I need to work with you tomorrow and the next month. And
Yeah.
And some of the best agents I've worked with over the years are hard.
Yeah.
But they're doing it in the right way and they push us to be better. And like one of my old friends is Jamie Mills, who worked in the business forever and still does Medicare, used to do group. And I've known Jamie for a long time and she's phenomenal. She's an amazing advocate for her clients and she would push us. And I remember times we're thinking, oh, but it was always because she wanted us to be better because she believed in priority health.
Yeah.
And, at times that would frustrate you or may make you like in the moment angry. But in the end, when you look back at that and you realize what she was doing. And so I've had a ton of respect for Jamie. She and I are still friends and she was a great agent. She really advocated for her groups when it was something that she knew was right or believed. And she would push us and make it hard.
Yeah.
It was a tough relationship at times, but it made us better. And so I have a ton of respect for her.
That's great. And if you were coaching like a brand new agent just starting out, what would you tell them about building those long-term relationships with a carrier like Priority Health? Like what would you coach them through in order to be like the best agent for a carrier?
I mean, a lot of what we just talked about a minute ago with regards to the relationship and understanding the relationship.
Giving them grace, giving your
a little bit,
grace.
but also being a student of it a little bit, like learn the business and take the time to learn the business, take the time to understand and take the time to like really understand the health plans that you're working with because you can work with a whole bunch. I would advise like think about who you want your partners to be.
Mm-hmm.
Don't chase premium. Don't chase commission.
Yeah.
And that's hard to say a little bit, and I get it. Like, we're all working for money. We get paid, and agents in particular, it's you don't get paid unless you sell. And that's another reason I have a ton of respect for agents. Is this is a business, and you have to understand the business. But chasing commissions, chasing bonuses, those types of things don't always pay off in the end. Just do what's right for the customer, and everything else kind of takes care of itself. It's a little bit back to the lessons from the wood shop. If you just do what's right, it'll take care of itself. It doesn't mean don't pay attention to those things, but if that's the only thing you're chasing is a commission or a bonus or a premium, at the end, it's going to be a little bit tougher for you. I think, understand the plan, who's your best partner, and then things will eventually take care of themselves, and you'll have a long career that'll be really successful.
I love that.
For somebody starting out, I think of like plumbers, electricians, where it's got like kind of a built-in like journeyman format. I kind of wish the insurance industry had that.
I do too. My son actually didn't go to college. He's working in insurance.
Okay.
Nice.
He's 22, but I'm super proud of him because, he started at 20 doing insurance and didn't even know like the terminology. So you think about when you're 20 years old, like I know what I was doing when I was 20. I was, trying to find a party. No, I was at Michigan State trying to look for the next, the next kegger or something, burning couches and having fun. And no, I did not burn a couch, for the record. So that was not part of me. I may have watched a few burn, but, after we lost to Michigan, but he's 20 years old, and all of a sudden, my neighbor Mike Ramsby hired him, and I give Mike a ton of credit because he said, come into this industry.
Right.
Like, you don't have to have a college degree. You can learn this, and it's a good opportunity for him to build a career. I'm super proud of him because he's starting to really understand the business, and he's got an avenue forward in life if he wants to take it. But we have a hard time finding young people that want to get into this business.
Right.
And it's such a great opportunity for people, in particular, if maybe college isn't your track.
Yeah.
Go, find an agency and learn the business, because you can build a really hell of a good career in this industry.
Yeah.
And we are trying to put together, we tried it last year and it kind of fizzled out. I call it the apprentice program, where we're trying to create an apprentice program within our own company from customer service reps who want to eventually get into sales, and to creating
really
a path and a program where they can move from the phones into a sales environment, try it for a while. If it works, we keep moving forward. If not, they go back to their old position. And
that's really cool.
Yeah, we kind of kicked it off, and then budget stuff got in the way, and that goes like corporate stuff.
Well, you look at the marketplace too, is I think the average age of an insurance agent's plus 55.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like in the 50s.
Yeah. So we look at,
and I'm in my 50s, and I think I'm old. Like,
but what a great way to have a succession plan in that apprentice if they're coming on to, and doing it over time, not, hey, I want to, sell next year. I'm going to go out and find some bidders, and then my people are going to be scattered, and, all the unknowns, versus more handling it in-house, developing those to take over.
It's interesting. Like there is no clear path. I think that's part of the problem. Like when you get out of high school or college or whatever you end up going, there's no like, oh, here's the insurance path. Like I would bet you if you ask a lot of people in the business, they fell into the career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know how you create that path or make it more clear that there's options. It'd be great if there's some programs in colleges, and we've tried some over the years, to do some things like that and I think that there's opportunity there still to do that, because it's a great industry to be in. It really is.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to be an agent. Like I keep telling my son, why don't you go figure out how to, hop on with an agent, so anybody out there want to hire my son, he's,
there you go. It's in the market.
he's a lot smarter than me, a little taller too, which doesn't say much because I'm pretty short, but but it's interesting. It's sales is like that too. Like you always back into sales, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's no sales. Like you don't go to college to go into sales, and all of a sudden you find yourself selling because you couldn't get another, real job, and you figure it out. And, but same way, it feels very similar.
Do you have any like specific sales tips or a favorite sales tip?
Favorite sales tip, golden silence. Hard for me. My one of my favorite sales managers of all time was Betty Carter, who was awesome and amazing. And like opposite of me, which is why we worked well together. And she was the one that told me about golden silence, which I'm sure you all know it. It's,
I don't know what that means.
You go ahead and explain it to our listeners.
golden silence is stop talking.
That makes sense.
And the uncomfortableness of that moment will be filled with the customer talking because they don't like the uncomfortableness. They don't like that. It's a therapy trick too. My wife's a therapist, so they have the same approach. Like, just be comfortable not talking, which again, for salespeople, myself included, super hard because we just like to talk and sell and always be closing. ABC.
If we're not talking, it's not moving.
Yeah, exactly. I got to move the sale. But the best tip is listen to your customer and then be willing to adapt to what they tell you. Like when you walk into their office, look at the office.
Yeah.
Look what is hanging on the wall. Whatever your political leanings are, if there's a Trump picture in their wall, understand what that means as a salesperson. When you walk into the room, look and see what's in the room, see what's on their, do they have trophies from golf? Do they, whatever it is, find those ways that you can create those relationships. But the most important thing is at some point, stop talking. Yeah. Let them tell you what they want and then just repeat it back to them.
Yeah.
Basically.
I struggle with that a lot too. I'm sitting here saying, let him talk.
It's hard, isn't it? Like, I just want to keep talking. Well, I'm in the perfect spot right now because I'm being interviewed, so I just get to talk all I want. But
I love it.
One tip I heard as well, and we talked about it a few minutes ago, is we're educating these people. So when you give them a piece of information, sometimes you need to give them time to kind of process what you just told them so they can respond. They may not have it right away, and just being patient.
Yeah. It's hard as a salesperson, and you do feel very awkward in that moment. Cause if you counted, like, try it sometime with anybody and you're in the middle of a normal conversation, stop talking and count in your head and see how far you get before you start feeling uncomfortable. And you'd be shocked at how short that amount of time is. Yeah. Within a few seconds, you're going to start to feel uncomfortable. Yeah. And then you're going to want to fill that void with words of some sort.
But instead of you filling that void, let the client. Interesting.
Nice.
Yep. Betty also had some other ones too, like crying in the office, like when people are in tears, something bad's happened. And she said, I always have a box of Kleenex on my desk. And when somebody's crying, I just slide it over. And I say, I'm going to hand you this. And then I'll step away. And then when you're composed again, I'll come back. And I remember thinking, gosh, that sounds so cruel. But it was a good way to do it. Like, take the emotion out of it, because it can be emotional.
Yeah.
That's
a great point.
For sure.
Are there areas where you feel agents are leaving opportunities on the table?
Oh, there's always. I will speak for myself. When I was an agent, sometimes, like, as soon as you got the sale, you want to get out of there. And especially in the group space, like, get out before they change their mind. Like, I got it. They signed here and I'm out. In the individual markets, I think the biggest thing that people miss is the opportunity to look for other ways to help solve problems, in particular health insurance, where you have other ancillary type of coverages that you could offer to your customer. One, you can increase a little bit of revenue, which is great. Two is they're going to really, you're going to cement that relationship. Yeah. And the ability to cross-sell or to not be afraid to go back and say, hey, I've got something else for you, whether it's a hospital indemnity product or a cancer policy or whatever the case is. There's some really good products that can help people in the right moment. And they can also, again, create like this stickiness with those relationships. And I think a lot of people are afraid to go back, and they're afraid to go and ask for that. And they're also afraid to ask for referrals, which is amazing, because that's the best way to get business.
Yep.
What are some tips that you suggest on getting more referrals?
Ask for it. Simply, just ask for it. I think that's the best way to do it.
Give me a sound bite. Like,
I added one to our Facebook group today.
Hey, Scott,
you go. Well,
let me find it quick.
I just signed the contract. All right. Said, yep, let's do that. Cool.
I think asking for the sale is also hard too. Not to change subjects, but it's the same thing. Like you mentioned education. Like, we try to educate and educate and educate. At some point, you got to ask for the sale too.
Right.
And you got to be willing to kind of stop the education and let's just get to the point. And so being willing to ask for it in the sale as well is super important. But there's lots of ways now with social media in particular, like lots of ways to get referrals through your social media presence. And If you know you offer a service to somebody that they value, there should be no concern about asking people to refer you to somebody else because you're doing a service for those people. And Medicare, it happens, I think, a little bit more than other markets. I think people just love to say, oh, Eric's great.
Yeah.
He's handled my insurance for all these years, and call Eric. And you can build an entire book of business just off of word of mouth.
For sure. The ask that I put in our Facebook group today was, if you know anyone who could use a second opinion on their insurance, feel free to send them my way. I'd love to be a resource.
That's great. And there's also, like, especially in the like under 65 market, but the over 65 even, they're way more tech savvy now.
Yeah.
So
totally
get a business card that just has a QR code on it that goes to like a landing page that has your contact information and a nice, picture of you smiling and, what you can do to help them, and give them that QR code. Let them just click it with their phone, and you'll be surprised. I think we've assumed that like Medicare eligible folks don't understand technology. They kind of do.
Yeah.
Like, I think what happened with the QR code too was
COVID with the restaurants.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like now everybody knows, oh, I just use my phone. Dude, I can do it. And create a landing page. You can do it super easy on your website, really easy to do. And you can add some really cool stuff there and just sell yourself a little bit there.
Yeah. You can also give 2 business cards at the end of the meeting, one for you, one for your friend.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah. Scott, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this amazing advice and wisdom. We really, really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
We have one final question for you. And it is, when people talk about your leadership 10 years from now, what's one thing that you hope that they'll say?
Oh, gosh. I believe in people. I say that a lot. I believe in people. And it's my favorite part of my work is helping people. Yeah. And our team. And I want our team to be successful. And I've always said our job as leaders is to empower people to be as successful as they can. And to grow in life and to create opportunities. And so I believe in people over things like AI and all the other stuff. I mean, ultimately it's about people. And if people later in life look back and reflect and think of me as somebody who helped them in their life, that to me is like the greatest reward. Yeah. It's like your kids. It's the same thing. It's the same feeling of like helping people grow in their life, whatever they end up doing, wherever they end up in whatever they want to do, that if you can create an environment where they're able to be successful, whether it's even, and I've always said, I'd rather you leave Priority Health if you have a better opportunity somewhere else to improve whatever it is in your life. And if at the end you come back and look back to that time and think that's what helped me get to this next stage, then we've done our job. And then me as a leader, then I've done my job, and that's what I hope.
That's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Everything that I've learned about this industry is it is all about the people.
It is.
From carriers to clients to agents. This is a people business for sure.
Yep. And if you don't like people, then you're probably in the wrong business.
Yeah.
For sure. So,
totally agree. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been amazing.
Great.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
It was great. It was super fun.
Next time
really easy and relaxing.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Try to make a comfortable environment. And for our listeners, if you're unaware of Priority Health and all the great things that they do, please reach out to us. We'll connect you immediately. Phenomenal regional carrier in Michigan, continuing to expand and be very strong, both on the product and customer service side.
No, thank you so much. This has been great. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it was really fun to be here, and look forward to listening to it sometime in the future.
Yay. We can't wait.
That's awesome.